Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
Soulmates, I'm Nielle.
All right, on today's report, 2 men convicted of killing Malcom X are set to be exonerated decades later. Dr. Molina Abdullah, co-founder of Black Lives Matter LA, is actually here to give us an update on the organization. And a Denver police department has agreed to reforms in the wake of the death of Elijah McClain.
Also, a trial date is set for a Texas officer who shot and killed Tatiana Jefferson. We have your COVID-19 headlines, as well as New York lawmakers. They have introduced a bill that limits rap lyrics as evidence in criminal trials.
Soulmates, we have that and so much more because it's our voice and our truth. So let's talk about it.
Soulmates, good evening. Let's get to our top story. 2 of the 3 men convicted in the 1965 assassination of Malcom X are expected to be exonerated Thursday by Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance. A report in the New York Times says a 22-month investigation conducted by that DA's office and lawyers for the 2 men, now known as Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam, found that prosecutors and the FBI and the New York Police Department withheld key evidence that would have likely led to their acquittal decades ago. The men were known at the time of the killing as Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson. This story, is getting a lot of attention right now. Massive breaking news that says a lot about history. It essentially rewrites history in a story, and one of the most important stories, one of the most important assassinations, right? This man is obviously Malcom X, one of the most important, black men in our history. His book, iconic. His words, iconic. And listen, a lot of things that even in today's date, a lot of things that he said, people are still going to be like, okay, I wasn't okay with that. A lot of things that he said that he's known for saying, people would be like, well, that makes sense. That's simple. That's great. But decades ago, because the media, there weren't a lot of media that looks like us. That's right. Just the truth. It was predominantly, if there were any, allowed to actually have a national platform. And so the narrative about him came from that perspective.
Yeah, it was a one-sided story back then because you said we didn't have this kind of media. Mm-hmm. On top of that, I felt like there was conspiracy. People feel there was conspiracy theory behind what happened to him at the end of the day. So hearing this may bring some relief to some people's eyes and give them understanding and more of an idea of what really happened, or maybe even bring peace to some families. But it's important that this story does come out as we continue to discuss about and talk about him in history.
I think the important thing, Brooke, you said it perfectly, is that this rewrites history. For what we thought for so many years, these men have been convicted. Now this just changes everything. So I'm just curious to see what happens post this experience in their lives. What happens next? What do they do with their lives next?
Well, I'm really interested in hearing from our next guest because she could give us the historical context behind this story. So joining us now is Black Lives Matter Los Angeles co-founder, Dr. Molina Abdullah. Welcome, Molina.
Thanks so much for having me, Nielle and team. Thank you. This is really, really incredible news, especially, for many of us in movement. Malcom X, Minister Malcom X, Al-Haj Malik El-Shabazz provides constant daily inspiration. Before news of the exoneration came, I was quoting him. Someone asked me about capitalism as we move into this holiday season. And of course, I'm quoting Malcom X. You cannot have capitalism without racism. And I think it's really, really important that we continue to do justice in his name, which means lifting up his teachings, but also getting to the truth of who stole Brother Malcolm's life. And I want to say the name of the phenomenal independent scholar, Abdul Rahman Muhammad, whose film, Who Killed Malcom X, was really the inspiration behind getting to the core of who killed him. So when we talk about Aziz and Islam, Both of them, both of the men who were convicted, two of the three men who were convicted, had maintained their innocence since the murder of Malcolm X on February 21st, 1965. It wasn't about just getting out of prison. They were out of prison, right? In fact, Brother Islam has passed, but there's the stigma of having been connected with the murder of one of our greatest leaders, our almost sainted leader. And so it was really, really important that the truth was revealed, and Abdul Rahman Muhammad's film helped to do that. We know that Brother Aziz is now in his 80s. We hope that this brings more peace to his life. It also calls for us to remember that when there is talk of conspiracy, these are not just theories. There are actually conspiracies in practice. So if Aziz and Islam were not the collaborators, along with the third person who was convicted, who actually admits that he had involvement, who did have involvement. And so since 1965, we've been talking about the government's role in stealing the life of Minister Malcolm X.
So, Dr. Molina, since you brought that up, what do you think happened to the Honorable Malcolm X?
So I'm not sure what happened. I don't want to profess to know, but I do know that truth is coming out. And I think that we should all support the work of Abdul Rahman Muhammad, who has committed his entire life to figuring out who killed Malcolm X. He's done so on his own dime. So you can cash app him and chip in so he can help to uncover these questions. I do think that government absolutely played a role. When we think about what Minister Malcolm X was getting to towards the end of his life in 1965, he was beginning to peel back the layers where he was showing that it was not just an attack on Black people in America that we were facing, but the attacks on Black people in America, the subjugation, the oppression of Black people in America is connected with a worldwide effort to exploit Black people for the enrichment of white capitalism. And so I think that we need to remember that there were many forces at play.
Wow.
Dr. Abdullah, I have a question on the same note. As the New York Times noted, this does represent a pretty remarkable acknowledgement of massive errors made in one of the important murder cases in our history. Obviously, the 1965 murder of one of, as we've all noted, America's most influential Black leaders in the fight against racism. And so I wanted to ask you what you thought about that, the acknowledgement of those errors, because it kind of mirrors a story that it seems we have every day. An exoneration every day of, a Black man who spent decades in prison is likely on death row or something like that. The errors, when you see all three different entities all admitting to errors made in a case that had everyone's eyes on it, what do you think about that?
Well, one, I think that we need to remember that we can never entrust the systems that that stole the life of our beloved princes, Ossie Davis calls him. We can't entrust them to tell the story now, just as they couldn't be entrusted to tell the story then. So this notion of errors is meant to cover up the fact that there was a cover up, that there were lies, that there was an intentionality. It wasn't errors. It wasn't a dropping of the ball. It was an actual conspiracy to both steal the life of Minister Malcolm X, to undo a movement that was building, that was growing in power, and then to cover that up. And so these are not errors, these are intentional cover-ups, and we should reject that notion and that language of errors.
Dr. Abdullah, we thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate that. And we know more things will come from this story now that we have this breaking news today. But we're going to switch gears here. Talk to us about the state of Black Lives Matter today.
Sure. So Black Lives Matter continues to grow, continues to do work. I think many are looking for the protests that we had a year and a half ago and going, why are there not 100,000 people in the streets? Well, most of us have had to go back to in-person work, right? We can't expect for the world to be in a constant state of massive uprising. But Black Lives Matter continues to do work, continues to grow and build and push for policy. So today was People's Response Act Day. So we're doing work in the policy realm with people like Representative Cori Bush, who was a Black Lives Matter organizer in St. Louis and is now one of our stalwart leaders, our most courageous leaders in the halls of Congress, where we're saying that we need to invest our public dollars in the things that actually make communities safe, like housing and mental health resources and jobs programs for our people. And remember that what we call the carceral state, prisons and jails and police, actually don't create safe communities, that the safest communities are the most well-resourced communities, not the most policed communities. And so we're doing work in terms of policy. We continue to be in front of, out in the streets. We continue to protest, especially here in Los Angeles. We're taking on the police associations, which is really what we call organized crime, right? They are they call themselves unions. We say they are not unions because they stand in opposition to every other working class person. But we're confronting them and saying they will not continue to bully and bribe elected officials. They will not continue to, what I say, pilfer the public purse, right? Demand up to 50% of cities' general funds throughout this country. Most major cities are spending about 50% of their general fund on police. And that again means that we are not investing in education and arts programs and housing. So we're confronting police associations and seeking to end them. We have an End Police Associations campaign, and we're moving into the holiday season. And for the last 6 years, Black Lives Matter has had a campaign called Black Xmas, where we're saying that we must build Black by investing in Black-led, Black-serving organizations. Buy Black. If you need to buy something during the holiday season for your loved ones, do it intentionally. Spend with Black-owned businesses, and then bank Black. Move your money away from those banks that finance, environmental degradation, that finance private prisons, that finance, gentrification, and put it in Black-owned banks like One United Bank, which is the largest Black-owned bank in the country. And so we're moving towards Black Xmas, and for more, people can go to blackxmas.org. So there's a lot moving. I love that. We're also trying to get police out of schools everywhere in the country. We've been successful in removing them from schools in LAUSD. And we can remember that the reason that we do this work is what just happened in Long Beach, where a school, quote unquote, safety officer murdered a student, Mona Rodriguez, after an after-school fight. Shot her in the back of the head as she was fleeing an after-school fight. This student and young 18-year-old mother's life was stolen because we shouldn't have police on campus. We should have resources on campus.
Oh my gosh, you are just giving us so much knowledge that I hate to stop you. I mean, we are learning so much from you. But we got to get to a couple more topics before your time runs out. I know you have limited time as well. So right now, the nation, we're watching two high-profile cases all unfold at the same time. So on one hand, we're looking to get some form of justice for Ahmaud Arbery's family, if that's possible in that case. And then you also have Kyle Rittenhouse. His trial is happening at the exact same time. What are your thoughts on how both of these situations are going to unfold?
Right. Well, thank you so much, beloved sister, for framing it that way, right? That justice for Ahmaud Arbery would mean that he's still here, right? But some semblance of justice for Ahmaud Arbery means bringing his murderers, creating accountability for his murderers, and exposing white supremacy. And so I know that Reverend Al Sharpton and others have called for a national day of prayer tomorrow. They're calling for clergy to come down to Brunswick, Georgia. If you can get there, please get there. That's going to be at 11 a.m. tomorrow. We need to struggle for justice in Ahmaud's name. We also need to be aware of how all of these systems collaborate for our oppression. And that's what we're seeing as the jury deliberates in the prosecution of Kyle Rittenhouse, the white murderer of at least 2 people, an attempted murderer of a third, who's been afforded grace by this Judge Schroeder, who thinks he's his father instead of the judge in the case, and continues to really enable white supremacy, violent white supremacy, to plague our country. We need to remember that who requires justice is Jacob Blake, and that's who was shot by police. That's who Kyle Rittenhouse was really fighting against. And so we need to demand justice for Jacob Blake, who thankfully is still with us, but is wheelchair bound for the rest of his life.
Right. There's so much more we want to talk to you about, Dr. Molina, but we're running out of time. So before we let you go, I think it's important that our soulmates know that you have a new role at an HBCU, Prairie View A&M. Can you talk to us? We have about 60 seconds left about your new role and how it is going to impact Black culture.
Sure. So I'm still a full professor at Cal State LA. I didn't leave that post, but I'm also activist in residence at Prairie View A&M University, my grandmother's alma mater. So I am grateful to be virtually on that campus this semester, and in person next semester. I'll be working with students and faculty to talk about how we use our intellectual tools to build a movement and build towards Black liberation. Grateful to Dr. Melanie Price and the leadership of Prairie View A&M University for having me there, and hopeful that universities all around the country will think about how they can be resources for Black liberation.
Right. Well, Dr. Molina, you know you always have an open invitation, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Great interview there. We appreciate your time. Soulmates, we do have other breaking news for you. Really sad news. Our Fox 13 News colleagues in Memphis have confirmed rapper Young Dolph was shot and killed in Memphis this afternoon. 3 independent law enforcement sources confirmed the news to the station. Dolph's full name is Adolph Robert Thornton Jr. He was 36 years old. Here's what we know happened so far. The owner of a cookie store in the city told Fox 13 Dolph walked into the store to buy cookies. Someone then drove up and shot and killed him around 1 p.m. Central Time. His Lamborghini was in the parking lot when news crews got to the scene. I just want to say this, Romeo, because I know you have thoughts, but my friend Cam said, dying in the city that you're born in is one of the more heartbreaking realities for Black men who make it. Yeah. And that just broke my heart.
You know, it's such a sad story, and I'll just say this real quick. Yesterday we had Tupac Shakur's brother here, Mopreme Shakur, and it's been over 25 years since his passing, and they're still affected. So here's a young man that's gone way too soon, and now his family has to just start this process of grieving and getting answers. So it's going to be hard for the industry to embrace this. We see it all over social media, but we do send prayers to the family.
I mean, answers are absolutely needed at this time, but also I do want to say that Young Dolph did own his masters, so if there was any other way to support his family and bring more to him and his family, we'll be, of course, streaming the music right now.
Definitely. All right, well, a jury convicted an Our man of first-degree murder Tuesday in the killing of Michael Williams, a Black man whose body was found burning in a ditch last year. Stephen Vogel, who's 32 years old, who is white, was also found guilty of abuse of a corpse in a case that Williams' relatives see as a possible hate crime, but authorities describe as a relationship dispute that turned lethal. 3 other people, including Vogel's mother, were charged with abuse of a corpse and accessory after the fact. Each pleaded not guilty, and their cases are pending, court records show. We broke the story when it initially happened. It's very disturbing, and I want to give our soulmates a little more detail now. They said he died by strangulation, and he was wrapped in a cloth, plastic, and carpet. His body was then wrapped in duct tape before being transported to a rural area and then set on fire. You think about the magnitude and the steps they went through after killing this man. So, and we do know this for a witness saw a truck at the scene, so hopefully that can help solve this case and get things done.
Yeah, pathologists said that he had marks around his neck, and there was a rope. So we know what that means as Black people in this country. And so it's just good to know that the wheels of justice are turning. The wheels of justice are turning in this situation because it's tragic. And there seems to be a silent killer when we talk about lynchings, and how police departments don't want to acknowledge when things like that happen. They want to say, oh, no, it was something else, or no, it was this or that. But there is an underlying conversation that is happening about lynchings becoming a reality again in this country. And it's really scary.
Very scary. U.S. Rep Benny Thompson has recommended a North Mississippi district attorney for an open position on the federal bench. The Democratic congressman sent a letter to President Joe Biden endorsing Scott Cullum as judge for the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Mississippi. The Commercial Dispatch is reporting. Cullum of Columbus, he is currently serving as district attorney for the 16th Circuit Court District. He also told a local newspaper, obviously, it's a great honor. As excited as I am for this opportunity, I have to also say that I love being district attorney, and I'll always appreciate the faith that the voters put in me. Another black man, a great position. Again, when we talk about having a seat at the table, this is what we love to see. And he put on Twitter how honored and grateful that he was for Benny Thompson to have him recommended for such a prestigious position. So definitely happy. I love seeing all of our black women and men getting those seats at the table that before were kind of seemed like they weren't getting.
Yeah, this is what Dr. Molina was talking about when we talk about a policy shift and change. You know, we're going to talk a little bit later about Los Angeles Attorney General Gascon. When you put people in place that understand the communities that they serve, that's where you see the change. And so district attorneys play a huge role in why black and brown people either have a fair trial or they are disenfranchised. And so to put people like this in office, this is when you really begin to see the change that we are looking for in this country as people of color.
You know, it's so interesting because the reason the congressman is getting involved in this and why so many lawmakers are saying, hey, we're going to send recommendations, we're going to get involved. You may remember there were 105 federal judgeships open when former President Barack Obama left office. Why? Because Republicans were in power in the House, in power in the Senate, and they virtually stopped all of his confirmations, any of his nominations. And we talk a lot about the Supreme Court, and not as much attention is paid to the courts that make decisions way before we even get to that point, right? And he was trying to fill all those judgeships. More than 100 were left open for Donald Trump to fill. And now that, Democrats are supposedly in power, the executive branch is supposedly in power, in Congress, everyone is trying to get this done.
And as they should, Brooke, because when Trump was in office, he filled a lot of those seats very fast, and he had the members of Congress to help push that through. So hopefully Joe Biden can do the same thing, and we get the equity that we're looking for when it comes to justice in this country.